Hi, Bailey here. As you may know, I've been volunteering at the Seattle Aquarium for over 2 years now, and in my time there I've made some pretty cool friends. The sea stars especially piqued my interest with their radial symmetry, water vascular systems, and madreporite. For my project, I decided to return to the aquarium to discover what happened when the sea star wasting disease hit the aquarium. But first, let's learn about these sparkling creatures. This is the underside of a sea star arm. Each arm has 2 rows of tube feet. Here's a better picture of them. At the end of each arm, sea stars actually have eyes. They can't identify who you are, but they can tell you whether or not it's light or dark out. You can see all the different species of sea stars there are. There are blood stars, vermilion stars, Velcro stars, painted stars, sun stars, not to mention ochre stars and leather stars and the slime stars, but those are just a few. I took my coworker Kyle to come to the aquarium with me to check them out. Let's see what happens when he touched the leather star.
Yeah, just one finger. No stroking.
Yeah.
Pretty kind of slimy though, the leather sea stars.
Definitely.
Yeah, leather sea stars are really slimy compared to like the, there's these black Velcro.
Yeah.
Completely different consistency. Blood sea star.
A fun fact about the leather sea stars that the volunteer failed to mention is that if you take a leather sea star out of the water, it smells like garlic. Nobody knows why, but trust me, it's still pretty stinky. Now this here is my favorite kind of sea star. This little guy is called a slime star, and slime stars have a special technique used to protect themselves against predators. As you can see, he's clinging to the glass with his little tube feet like we discussed earlier. But if something were to come up and scare him or spook him and he felt threatened, he would be able to excrete a ton of mucus. Just one of these sea stars has the power to fill this entire tank with mucus. Here's a clip of a slime star actually secreting the slime. Even though we try masking it, the aquarium used to have a lot more sea stars. This entire tank used to be filled with ochre and purple sea stars, but now is home to hermit crabs. Additionally, this whole tank was filled with sea stars, but now sea anemones remain. What could have happened to eradicate so much of the population?
Our populations along the west coast have been suffering from a die-off that's attributed to sea star wasting syndrome. And we've seen major die-offs in the areas around Vancouver, BC, Seattle, Washington, Monterey Bay, California, and Santa Barbara, California. And in these areas, we have seen relatively abundant populations of sea stars die, and so it's very difficult to find individuals at all at the sites that previously had many sea stars. Sea star wasting syndrome is a set of symptoms that progress within an individual until they ultimately die. And normally what happens is individuals start behaving a bit different. They'll twist their arms up or not look normal, or act at least in the normal behavior of sea stars that are healthy. They can sometimes look deflated, kind of look curled up, and then lesions oftentimes develop on the epidermis, their skin, which can rupture, spilling out some of their intestines and gonads, and then sometimes the arms will rip apart from the body, and then ultimately the individual will die. Primarily what people see though at the very end of it is a very large bacterial mat that is oftentimes described as a big pile of goo, and that's basically the tissue that has been degraded by bacteria.
Through these devastating images, you can see how the aquarium may have been hit hard. Volunteers were told they couldn't remove the sea stars anymore from the tanks to show the visitors a closer look. It would add too much stress on the already stressed animals. So in case you're in need for a new perspective, I wrote a children's story about ocean pollution and sea star wasting disease that sums it up in a seashell. Audrey the Octopus by Bailey Johnson. Dedicated to all the volunteers at the Seattle Aquarium and to those who have taught me the ways of the ocean. Down under the bubbles of the Pacific Ocean in Kelp Crest, Audrey the octopus was swimming back and forth with her pet crab on her tummy. As she made bubbles, the crab popped them with his pincers. "Hey, look!" called a distant voice. "It's Audrey the octopus!" Suddenly, Audrey was joined by Lincoln the sea otter, a classmate of hers. Behind him swam up Carl the sea star, Scarlet the whale, and then Ezra the harbor seal, Lincoln's best friend. Thankfully, they passed by, so she swam back home to put her crab away. There she ran into her mother. "Hi, sweetie," Mama Audrey cooed. She searched her daughter's face and stopped her in her tracks. "What's wrong, dear?" "The kids in my class are teasing me again," Audrey said begrudgingly. Mama Audrey gave her daughter a big hug and told her to ignore the other kids' rude words and to never forget how special she was. Mama Audrey watched her daughter swim away and sighed. Audrey had been subject to teasing ever since they moved to Kelp Crest because she was the only octopus at her school. The children had heard stories about octopuses in their ink, which made them unnecessarily afraid of their species. On her swim to school, Audrey thought a lot about what her mother had said and decided to focus on how sunny the day was and not let the other kids get her down. She reached the school and joined the other kids on the playground. Suddenly, a group of kids hurried past Audrey as they coughed and held their noses. Audrey was swept up in a dark cloud of black water and couldn't move her arms. A few moments later, she was spit out of the whirlpool and ran into Lincoln's back. "Watch it!" he cried. Audrey bounced off him and steadied herself. "I'm really sorry. I couldn't see anything. It was so muggy." Lincoln laughed. "Ha! Muggy? I think you mean inky." Audrey frowned and watched him swim away, calling, "Audrey the inker, she is a stinker. Audrey the inker, she is a stinker." The little octopus sadly perched on a nearby rock and watched her peers swim off to class. "I didn't do it," she said quietly to herself. "I didn't ink." One of the recess teachers, Mr. Walrus, came up to Audrey and sat down.
Audrey, we're sending everyone inside until we know it's safe to be out here.
"But everyone thinks it's me," Audrey cried. Mr. Walrus gave Audrey a reassuring pat on the back.
By the consistency of the black water and the fact that it didn't arise before you came to the playground, I know for a fact that it wasn't you, and you know it wasn't you either. Those other kids are scared of the unknown and have no right to bring it out on you. I'm sorry, Audrey."
Audrey smiled and wiped away her tears, and they both left to go to class together. Over the course of the next few weeks, the strange black water spread throughout Kelp Crest and plagued the town. There were other reports of strange behavior in Kelp Crest as well. A giant plastic cylinder came down and crushed Mrs. Nudabrink's garden. The Spiny Lumpsucker family spent an entire day cleaning out their house of a mysterious, thick, stinky sludge that crept inside through a window. It was clear to the other students that the strange happenings of Kelp Crest were not caused by Audrey, and Lincoln knew he must apologize for his behavior. After gathering up the courage to admit his mistakes, Lincoln paid Audrey a visit at her home. "Oh, hi," said Audrey, surprised to get a visitor. "It's not safe to be outside. What are you doing here?" Lincoln swallowed his pride and offered her a box. Inside the box was a Squid Pop, Audrey's favorite frozen treat. "I'm sorry, Audrey. I now realize that this abnormal behavior around town isn't anything you did. I've been a jerk, and I want to apologize for being so mean. You're different from everyone else, but not in a bad way, and I know that now." Lincoln looked up at Audrey to see her smiling. "Thank you, Lincoln. That means so much to me," she said. They hugged, and Lincoln swam home while Audrey enjoyed her treat. The next day at school, Lincoln was nowhere to be found. Ezra and Scarlet talked in hushed voices and acted suspicious. "Audrey!" they summoned. She swam over, and they confided in her that Lincoln's house had been destroyed last night. His house was the best in Kelp Crest, made of coral and shells. According to Ezra and Scarlet, the house began to deteriorate over the last few weeks, and the whole thing came crashing down. Luckily, no one was hurt in the process, but Lincoln's mother was in the hospital. Audrey, Ezra, and Scarlet quickly took off to the hospital to visit Lincoln in the time of need. "What are you doing here?" Lincoln asked Audrey. "I've been terrible to you. You shouldn't be so kind." Audrey shook her head. "It doesn't work like that. We've had our differences in the past, but now we're friends, and friends help each other when they're struggling." Lincoln smiled through his tears. The rest of the day, while Lincoln and his family were in the hospital, Ezra, Audrey, Scarlet, and Carl began building them a temporary house until they were back on their feet. They created dens out of rocks and used spare wood to create shelter and carpeted the whole interior with soft seaweed. When Lincoln's family returned the next day, they came bearing news.
"Well," said Lincoln's father, "we know what is causing this terror on Kelp Crest. However, there is little we can do to stop it. Pollution. The humans are using their ocean as trash cans and is harming our environment rapidly. The mysterious object in Mrs. Nudabrink's garden was some sort of drinking device, a water bottle, I believe. The substance in the Spiny Lumpsucker's house was an abundance of trash that made its way to the bottom of the ocean."
He directed his attention at Audrey.
And the ink you were so wrongly accused of was oil. The humans are putting too many bad chemicals into the ocean, which is what destroyed our home. My sources tell me that the humans are aware of the problem, and yet they are doing nothing to stop it."
Everyone was quiet while they absorbed all this information. Suddenly, Carl started to scream. Audrey whipped around and saw Carl turn a sickly color. "Quick! Back to the hospital!" she cried. 12 hours had gone by, and all of Carl's friends and family were gathered in the waiting room. His doctor walked into the room, and everyone collectively held their breath. Silently, his mother began to cry. "I'm afraid the prognosis isn't good," the doctor said, looking down. "Carl has sea star wasting disease, an illness that has been affecting sea stars all over the west coast. We'll be keeping him here for the next few weeks to see how he responds to the illness, but I'm sorry to say there's nothing we can do." The room was silent. Carl's mother shook with tears, and his father held her close. Audrey was the first to speak. "We need to use this as a way to get people aware of what is happening down here. Carl is sick, our houses are being destroyed, our town ruined. We need to make the humans aware of what is going on and find a way to stop this madness." Everyone muttered in agreement and left in shifts to go visit Carl. He was propped up with his left arm covered in bandages. "What happened to your arm?" whispered Scarlett. Carl told them that he woke up after a few hours of being in the hospital and found his arm just next to his bed. "It's the sea star wasting disease," Carl said. "They don't know why it happens, but arms deteriorate and show up abandoned on the ocean floor. This time it won't regenerate either." The room was silent again as the information sunk in. They all circled around Carl and hugged him, knowing that was the only thing they could do possibly to help. "Oh, Carl, we'll find a way to fix this. The humans will hear our tale and change the way they're behaving. You'll be an inspiration. You'll make a change," Lincoln said. The doctor poked his head into the room. "Carl, you have a special visitor." An elegant sea jelly swept into the room and smiled at Carl. "Hello, my name is Alexa. I've been traveling around the oceans to tell my story, and it seems like it's very pertinent in this town. My best friend was one of the first sea stars to come down with the illness. He grew up in the Pacific Ocean just like you, and traveled to Australia, where I live now. When he became ill, everyone in his family grew afraid of the mysterious disease and refused to do anything about it. Shortly after he was diagnosed, he died. I was so sad and so angry at the water around me for doing this that I decided to do something about it. Australia is a very heavily scuba diver populated area, and I knew some of my friends had had face-to-face encounters with them. I had an idea, decided to gather up abandoned remains of old sea stars that left without their arms and other pieces of their body when they contracted the illness, and place them in a popular diving cove. I waited until the scuba divers descended and watched them take the remains out of curiosity. They returned week after week, and I provided more pieces to show them how serious the situation was getting. I even started adding abandoned hermit crab shells that had holes in them and fatal cracks from the high concentration of chemicals in the ocean. Through the power of seeing, I was able to get the idea across to someone that could do something about it. Everyone in the room hung on her every word, and Alexa giggled when she realized it. Eventually, a dive team came into my town. They surveyed our little town and saw the animals affected and even took my best friend's body. They placed it into a bag labeled research, meaning they are really doing something about it. Don't give up hope, young ones. Together, you can reach the humans and tell them their actions are harming the ones you love. Alexa beamed at everyone, and Carl even smiled. When she left, the gang began formulating a plan on how to save Kelpcrest and its citizens from the hands of the humans. Audrey looked around the room at the people she now called her best friends, and hoped the humans were out there and listening. So there you have it. This Denso virus, transmissible from one sea star to another, is what caused this terrible death. The Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium lost over half of its 316 sea stars. Now the Seattle Aquarium displays this signage, trying to demonstrate to those visitors how devastating this loss really was. Here is the Underwater Dome, one of the most popular attractions at the Seattle Aquarium. This used to house 2 sun stars, bigger than trash can lids. Hopefully one day we will be able to see the life and vitality in the sea stars again. Until then, I ask that you're like this random kid that I videoed, who appreciate all of the moments, and appreciate the ocean and what it can give. And never underestimate the power it has on you and the creatures within.
So, for once in my life, let me get what I want. Lord knows it would be the first time.